Oh, I'm gonna walk. Hard. I will.
Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. Jake Kasdan's brilliant 2007 satire of music biopics, starring John C. Reilly in what The Ringer recently correctly named one of the 100 best performances of the 21st century. Across its 2-hour runtime, this film incisively lampooned every formulaic trope of what had by then become dull, predictable Oscar bait. There's the opening scene, right before a legendary concert, in which the protagonist has to think about his entire life before he plays.
Dewey Cox needs to think about his entire life before he plays.
The childhood tragedy, the first recording session where the cynical record label execs are won over, the endless montages, the inevitable descent into drug addiction, and of course, the final triumphant performance. Walk Hard did it all, and it did it brilliantly. It was such a devastating takedown of the genre that it should have killed music biopics forever. But tragically, the movie was a colossal flop. Like, it opened at number 8 at the box office and was gone from theaters within 2 weeks. So what went wrong? Did this movie simply need more blankets? Less blankets? Or could it be...
He needs more blankets and he needs less blankets.
I'm afraid you're right.
Regardless, it was a total disaster. And since no one went to see the movie, the change that should have happened never did. And the scourge of dull music biopics persisted for more than a decade. Until finally, another movie came along and had the impact that Walk Hard should have. But this movie wasn't a satire at all. This movie was Bohemian Rhapsody, the most successful music biopic ever made. A movie that grossed nearly $1 billion and won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Rami Malek. And seemingly, it killed the music biopic. Or at least, it killed that version of the music biopic. But in the past 6 years, I started to notice a change. In my spare time, I began an ongoing project, doing extensive research and studying this intriguing new phenomenon. I recorded every instance of its rapid evolution, following its transformations as surprising new mutations and adaptations occurred. You know, real science shit. And finally, my research has come to a shocking conclusion, something that I never would have predicted back in 2019. Music biopics might have actually become good. Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Patrick Willems, and after a long, weird, lonely summer, I am finally back in the studio, joined for the first time in far too long by Emma.
Great to be here, and especially pumped about today's topic.
Emma, I'm not sure you need the goggles and gloves for this. We're not gonna have any volatile chemicals in this episode.
I'm just getting into the spirit of scientific discovery. Plus, I have a radical new theorem to present. The Lizard King assumption.
Based on the classic film The Doors.
Of course.
And I can't wait to hear it, because of course, Oliver Stone's The Doors is highly relevant to today's topic, as well as an essential film. Speaking of which, have you gotten a Kilms shirt yet from the Patrick H. Willems 2025 merch collection? Because you should.
Can I keep the goggles and gloves on?
Yeah, sure, whatever's comfortable. Oh, and speaking of cool clothes, a big thank you to our friends at Rowing Blazers for providing my outfit for this video. And to all other clothing brands out there, you too could live the dream of being featured in a mid-tier film analysis channel. Contact info is in the About section on the channel. So anyway, I just got back from a wonderful trip to Europe, where I had the closest thing I will probably ever have to a religious experience. I went to see Oasis in Dublin. And when I looked up at Noel and Liam finally reunited hand in hand, eating up the rapturous cheers from the crowd, I started thinking about how, if a movie about their lives is ever made, finally, with this iconic reunion tour, it has a perfect ending. Which brings me to the reason we are here today, music biopics.
Patrick! As your producer, it's my job to keep track of the show Bible, and I have to tell you that you've already covered this topic. And it says here that you got addicted to heroin in that episode? And Matt died of food poisoning too.
Actually, even though at the time we had not yet confirmed the existence of a multiverse, that episode took place in an alternate universe, so don't worry about it.
Gotcha, I'll make note of it. This lore is so messy.
So as we have proven before on this channel, the best way to discuss cinema is of course through rigid academic principles. I'm talking math, science, and the easily quantifiable vibes. So today, think of the studio like a science fair, with Emma as my lab assistant and Nobbles as like a test tube or whatever, I don't care. And like any great middle school science project, we must begin with the scientific method. Can't get much more sciencey than that. So with the help of this tried and true method, we will present how we discovered this recent biopic evolution. So hey, Bill Nye, look at me. Look at me. I'm the science guy now. Step one is make an observation. Did music biopics get better? Step two, do research. A few years back, I watched Rocketman on a plane. Step three, form a hypothesis. Music biopics got better. Step four, test with experiments. I watched a shit ton more music biopics. Step five, analyze data. I went and counted up how many I gave a heart to on Letterboxd. And finally, step six, report conclusions, which is what we are here to do today. But before we can explore the exciting mutations and evolutions, we need to look at what the earlier form of the music biopic genus looked like. Now, in case you don't want to go watch the original video from 6 years ago, here is a quick refresher on what music biopics traditionally were. Actually, I think if we're going to talk about the past, we should give this section like an old-timey look to match. Emma, crank the hypnology. Whoa, it wasn't that long ago. Maybe you split the difference? Perfect. While there were a handful of unique cases, like Clint Eastwood's Bird or Todd Haynes' I'm Not There, those films were not commercial successes, and so did not lead to newer or weirder versions of the genre. And so, most music biopics rigidly adhered to the same formula. The film starts right before a big performance, then flashes back to their early life. We see the rise to fame, and then the film largely becomes a long montage for the second half, checking off all the major events in their lives, concerts, tours, relationships, and then there's the inevitable descent into addiction, usually cocaine or alcohol, sometimes heroin. Presumably a future iteration of this will be about someone getting addicted to cough syrup and ketamine. Anyway, then relationships fall apart until they finally go to rehab and clean up for one last triumphant performance, but not before mending all their past relationships to show what a humble and amazing person they are, with text at the end telling us how happy and successful they went on to be.
Except in The Doors, where Jim Morrison totally dies at the end.
That is correct. He sure did. So while Walk Hard was largely referencing Walk the Line and Ray, the ultimate example of this kind of film came in Bohemian Rhapsody, a movie ostensibly directed by alleged sex pest Bryan Singer that embodies everything I like least about these movies. It so rigidly sticks to the formula that it makes a fascinating life into what feels like a cartoon. It has so little interest in the creative process that it reduces it to moments like this.
Oh, that's really good.
The movie rushes through so many major events, it feels like one endless montage. It's rated PG-13, so it sanitizes all the drugs and sex that were actually part of the story. The subjects of the film, the surviving members of Queen, are way too involved behind the scenes, leading to jarring editing to give them equal screen time, and a story that goes out of its way to present them as responsible people who never stayed out late partying. And ultimately, it has nothing to offer other than a slavish cinematic recreation of Queen's Live Aid performance, which you can just already go watch on YouTube. It was truly the most music biopic ever made, which I do not say as a compliment. And then something happened. Maybe it was the impact of Bohemian Rhapsody, where every human on Earth saw it and collectively decided, that's enough of that. Or maybe it was that this channel finally held a mirror up to the industry when we released our original music biopics video back in 2019, and they simply could not deny the truth of my claims.
But you said that this was a different you from another universe, but not the Patrick Explains one?
Shut up, Nobbles. It's called a hypothesis. I'm doing science here. So yeah, maybe our music biopics video really was watched by all the power players in Hollywood, and it got them thinking it was time for a change. That would make our video an evolutionary catalyst. You know, like how the obelisks in 2001: A Space Odyssey showed monkeys how to use tools. Also, quick aside to all the Hollywood power players who might be watching, hit me up if you need advice on how to adjust some other tired genres. I have a lot of thoughts on how to revitalize the dystopian sci-fi teen drama. But back to the topic at hand. Whatever the catalyst actually was, it kicked off a set of events that would ripple out for years. It was here that music biopics began to evolve. Now, right now, you might be thinking, Patrick, this is pretty far-fetched. You can't possibly back this theory up. In high school, you only got a 3 on the AP Physics exam. Well, first of all, who the hell let you look at my permanent record? And second, you could not be more wrong. Prepare to be blinded with science. Okay, bring it in. Keep it going. Let's begin. The first mutation was 2019's Rocketman, which on paper seems like it's going to be just another clone of Bohemian Rhapsody, a movie about a gay British musical artist with a flamboyant stage persona who changed his name and rose to fame. It was directed by Dexter Fletcher, the man who took over directing Bohemian Rhapsody after Bryan Singer was fired. And also, once again, the actual people it's about were heavily involved. Elton John is literally a producer. And right from the opening scene, it seems like it's gonna be just the same formula again. It begins with Elton John going to rehab and then flashes back to his childhood. But it's not quite another Bohemian Rhapsody, because Rocketman developed some unexpected new traits. Its first mutation is that it's rated R, which doesn't seem like it should be a big deal until you realize how rare that actually is. Let's be real, all of these famous musicians lived R-rated lives with sex and drugs, and I'm pretty sure they said some bad words sometimes. But most of these movies, Ray, Walk the Line, especially Bohemian Rhapsody, sanitized the stories and toned them down to a PG-13. But Rocketman actually takes the extra step and goes for the R rating. Even if it's not especially explicit, it has a gay sex scene. It has drug use, and people say fuck a bunch of times. And you know what? It makes a difference. But the bigger step forward is that it's a musical, like a full, proper, people burst into song and dance musical. This gives it all an energy and flamboyance that matches Elton John's life and music, but more importantly, it allows for it to bring in a level of abstraction in certain sequences, where, like with any musical, we understand that this is not what is literally happening. It's using music and visuals to portray how the characters are feeling, like during the early performance at the Troubadour, when Elton and the audience begin to levitate, or during the performance at Shea Stadium, when he literally blasts off like a rocket. The storytelling and most of the supporting characters are still very broad, and it hits all the standard biopic cliches. He's got the distant father, the rise to fame happens really rapidly, relationships begin and end in consecutive scenes. It feels like a film adaptation of a jukebox Broadway musical, which makes some of the usually annoying cliches go down easier. But yes, it still basically has the same exact ending as Ray, with text and photos telling us that Elton John never did drugs again and is a great person and is very happy and successful. The music biopic genus lay dormant for the next few years with no major evolutions, since the pandemic really reduced the amount of movies being released. I mean, there was the Netflix Motley Crue movie The Dirt, which in classic Netflix style made virtually no impact. But then, in 2022, we got our next major step in evolution. Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, the movie that made Austin Butler a star and gave Tom Hanks COVID. Now, obviously, no movie would actually be worth giving beloved actor Tom Hanks a deadly disease, but better this one than that live-action Pinocchio. Once again, on paper, Elvis is another walk hard. We see his whole life from childhood through death. It hurtles through countless eras and relationships and performances. It has moments that feel like
The 60s are an important and exciting time.
like when it devotes a whole scene to Elvis getting upset about Martin Luther King's death, despite never mentioning him before.
Dr. King.
But the thing about Elvis is that while it may be following the cliched biopic formula, the actual execution is insane. This movie is out of its mind. It does the classic move of beginning in the present and flashing back to the start of the story, except here our POV character is not the title character. It's Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks under 100 pounds of latex, giving one of the most deranged performances of the century. The opening sequence is a fever dream, following a fat old Dutch man on a morphine drip staggering through Las Vegas casinos as roulette wheels spin through his brain. The first scene of Elvis performing and making girls in the audience lose control is straight out of Walk Hard, but Luhrmann's filmmaking is so aggressive and maximalist that it manages to transcend the cliche. It really works. Now, not to brag, but I do have the most popular review of Elvis on Letterboxd, and I stand by what I said back then. Congrats to Baz Luhrmann for making the world's first 2.5-hour movie trailer. Elvis barely has scenes. It is one relentless montage. Sometimes it turns into a comic book. There are flashbacks within flashbacks. Instead of caring about respectful, documentary-style realism like most other biopics, it exaggerates its telling to represent how it felt to be there. Elvis's songs are remixed to hit harder and match the energy of the hyperkinetic, stylized visuals. Capturing the seismic impact Elvis had on people at the time, utilizing every cinematic trick available, such as the classic technique called playing Doja Cat during montages. The single biggest problem with most biopics is that they try to tell the subject's entire life as one story and refuse to pick a focus. So each of these movies ends up just being about how great this person was and nothing more than that. And to its credit, Elvis doesn't do that. As much as it does cram literally his entire life into the film, it is, from moment one until the final text at the end, about the relationship between Elvis and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who manipulated him for decades for his own financial gain. It has the strange effect of kind of making Elvis a supporting character in a movie literally called Elvis, and for much of the film, Elvis is held at a remove. We see him through the perspective of this creepy old Dutch guy.
The Dutch.
It is a lot to take in, and it makes me wish that Luhrmann had applied his approach to just one part of Elvis's life instead of cramming the whole thing into one movie. But still, this is an exciting evolution. And the movie was a hit. Like, it was a genuine blockbuster that earned a Best Picture Oscar nomination. And in the movie world, nothing helps speed up evolution like money and Oscars. Because then, the unthinkable happened. Somehow, Rocketman and Elvis came together and reproduced, creating a massive leap forward for the music biopic genus. Something that took the evolution of man and blew it straight out of the water. Because compared to that snooze fest, this one inverted itself and ended with a monkey. Better Man is a music biopic about the life of Robbie Williams. And for all you Americans watching, I am saying Robbie Williams, not Robin Williams. Because for the past few decades, Robbie Williams has been one of the biggest pop stars in the world, pretty much everywhere but North America. Although that said, he did have a hit song here in 1999 when I was a kid. His song Millennium was all over the radio and on MTV, so really, Americans, you just have bad memories. Or you're young. Most biopics happen when the subjects are either dead or really old. Williams is only 50, which might seem kind of early for a biopic set largely in the 90s and 2000s. But this is not a normal biopic. It's a better one. But right away, Better Man breaks the cardinal sin of a biopic. It has the actual subject involved. Robbie Williams not only serves as the narrator and provides his own singing vocals, but the film is actually based on a series of audio recordings of Williams telling stories about his own life. Usually, when the artists are involved, it's to control and sanitize their image. This halts new innovations and adaptations and creates a degenerate subcategory of the music biopic genus, which we call the hagiography, such as Straight Outta Compton, which has Ice Cube and Dr. Dre as producers. And there, you can feel them controlling the narrative. That narrative being, hey, not only am I a musical genius, but I'm a good person too. But in Better Man, Robbie Williams displays a shocking level of honesty and a willingness to look really bad. For long stretches of the film, he comes off as extremely unlikable, as his terrible self-destructive behavior alienates everyone close to him. Like, there's a scene where his fiancée discovers that he's been cheating on her while Williams is in the bathroom shooting heroin. It has the feeling of like a good memoir with a very clear-eyed look at his life and his many flaws. But the real revelation of Better Man is an elusive Australian gene that has turned out to be the key factor in this recent evolution of the music biopic: director Michael Gracey. Gracey started his career spending years working closely alongside Baz Luhrmann, clearly picking up some creative DNA there. And then, after becoming a successful director of TV commercials, he was attached to direct Rocketman. Gracey spent 6 years developing that movie with Elton John and writer Lee Hall. In 2013, when Gracey was first announced as directing the film, the press release read, "Rocketman will feature fantastical choreographed sequences around Elton John's biggest hits," with Gracey quoted saying, "Elton John's journey from impossible dreamer to stardom and uncontrollable excess is something only a musical film can capture." And so, it was Gracey who chose to make the film a musical, beginning this whole evolution we're talking about now. And also, Gracie's version was set to star Tom Hardy as Elton John, which sure would have been something. Because of delays, Gracie ended up moving from one-man musical to another, leaving Rocketman and directing The Greatest Showman. Now that is a movie that has been covered before on this channel, and I would not go so far as to call it good, but it does have an appealing energy. It's easy to get swept up in it, especially if you've had a bit to drink. And it's also sort of technically a biopic, albeit one that has zero interest in historical accuracy. But anyway, The Greatest Showman became a surprise blockbuster, and it gave Gracie something of a blank check for his next project. And for that project, he chose to return to what he had tried to do in the first place, make a music biopic. But this time, as he put it, I just don't want to do another Bohemian Rhapsody or Rocketman musical biopic. I just felt there was a more creative way of entering into this particular story. And boy, is that ever a massive understatement. Because yeah, he did find a more creative way of entering this particular story. Because instead of doing the normal thing and casting a movie star with a passable physical resemblance as Robbie Williams, he made him a monkey. Yes, that's right. In Better Man, for the entire film, like literally every single scene, Robbie Williams is portrayed as an anthropomorphic chimpanzee, played via performance capture by John O'Davies with visual effects by Weta Digital. We do not see a human version of Williams once in the entire film. It is, to put it mildly, an utterly psychotic creative choice that alienated millions of potential viewers who just wanted a more traditional biopic, while also doubling the budget because of the thousands of VFX shots required. But it did maybe trick a few people into seeing it because they thought it was a Planet of the Apes sequel. So that's something. And look, while the whole monkey thing is objectively very weird, it's also pretty brilliant. So much of the attention every music biopic gets is just about the accuracy of the lead performance. Do they get the voice right? Do they look like them? Do they do their own singing? Do the teeth play? And here, for the first time ever, none of that matters. The monkey takes away the baggage most of these movies have. We stop thinking about this as someone doing an impression of Robbie Williams' real guy. We just accept this monkey as Robbie. It's a testament to Davies' incredible egoless work, giving the kind of performance that 100% would get an Oscar nomination if it were live action. It's what makes the scene where Liam and Noel Gallagher show up feel weird, because suddenly, for the first time in the movie, we are thinking about whether or not an actor got the real person's voice and whole vibe right. And obviously, me being me, I am obsessively studying Leo Harvey Ellige's performance as Liam, which is, like, okay. It's not good enough to justify casting him in the inevitable Oasis biopic that I would like to pitch to any Hollywood power players who might be watching this. But anyway, Gracie's aim with the monkey, beyond a very expensive, complicated way to stand apart from other biopics, is to reflect how Robbie Williams sees himself. In those audio recordings of him telling his life story, he would repeatedly refer to himself as a performing monkey. So Gracie just made it literal. There's a tendency for biopics to present their subjects as mythic figures. The movies are always made by fans, who clearly idolize their subjects. There's this impulse to faithfully recreate the iconography, like a big nerd adapting their favorite comic book. The movies are always shot with this glossy, respectful visual style that announces their seriousness. But Better Man, from the opening words of Williams' narration to the final shot, a close-up of the monkey's eyes looking back at us, is told purely subjectively. Despite its roots as a sort of documentary audio archival project, it's not meant to show these events exactly as they were, but rather how they all felt to him. It still has the same basic arc as every other biopic. The kid who dreams of stardom achieves it, he becomes a huge success, which leads to a downward spiral and substance abuse until he eventually gets his shit together for a happy ending, but presenting it all through Williams' eyes makes cliches like the inevitable trip to rehab go down easier. Also, it's important to remember, he is a monkey, and monkeys make everything more fun. And staying in his perspective focuses the whole movie on one core idea. It's all about Williams' need for love and validation from other people, instilled in him by his father from an early age, which leads to massive career success and almost destroys him. The film is his dark journey towards self-acceptance, to the point when he can finally internalize what his grandmother tells him early on.
You're enough.
Formally, the film is a big swing away from the slick theatrical style of The Greatest Showman. Gracie shoots it with surprising naturalism, handheld cameras and practical lighting, with the digital film grain cranked up so there's a real feeling of griminess and grit there. And being told all through Robbie Williams' eyes gives the film the freedom to enter sequences of full abstraction that go way beyond Rocketman's musical numbers. It's clear here that there has been a major growth in the abstractus gene, as we're calling it. Recently, friend of the channel, Thomas Flight, made his own video on music biopics, about how a problem with them is that there's an obligation to fit a ton of musical performances into the films, since that's what the audience is mostly showing up for. And since those songs take up so much of the screen time, we're left with significantly less time to tell the story, making it feel rushed. But in Better Man, that is never an issue. Almost all of the music here is in the form of classic musical numbers. Like Rocketman, this is a jukebox musical filled with songs from throughout Williams' career. But instead of the numbers simply having him on a stage performing to a crowd, halting the story so we can listen to a famous song, here each number is a pivotal point in the narrative that drives the story forward. The big showstopper sequence is Rock DJ, which takes the place of the standard montage you see in every music biopic, where the central character becomes famous, goes on tour, is mobbed by fans, performs on TV, and makes a lot of money. Here, it's done as a musical number in an unbroken 4-minute long take, starting with Robbie's group, Take That, as a new band who's just signed to a label, and following them through record releases, award shows, and huge fame. Until at the end of the sequence, as the camera cranes up on London's Regent Street, the band is surrounded by hundreds of extras dancing. It is a thrilling piece of filmmaking, probably the best musical number from a recent movie that is not Spielberg's West Side Story. It makes the audience feel the excitement Robbie and the band are feeling, and it finds a brand new way to hit a story beat we've seen countless times before. And also, not to take credit for yet another thing, but I did literally do a Rock DJ musical number with a bunch of extras on a street back in 2006 in a movie I made in high school called Chef Lock and Wafson 2. So did Michael Gracie see that and rip it off? That is highly unlikely, but anything is possible. Come Undone, which comes right after Robbie has been fired from Take That, gradually enters full horror movie territory, with Robbie recklessly driving a car past road flares that turn the frame blood red until he crashes the car into the water and journalists and photographers swarm him like sharks. When he meets his future fiancée, Nicole Appleton, at a New Year's Eve party, they sing a duet of She's the One, and as their dance escalates, through elegant match cuts, the film leaps ahead through their relationship, through an engagement, Nicole's pregnancy, and Nicole's manager forcing her to terminate it. Where most biopics lazily rush through relationships, simply checking off a list of events without ever getting to know the people, here, Better Man tells a whole story in 4 minutes and you actually feel it. It's like the opening sequence of Up, but with a dancing monkey drug addict. And then There is the single most audacious sequence in the film, maybe one of the wildest things in any movie this century, definitely the most insane thing ever put in a music biopic. The climax of the film comes when Robbie plays the biggest concerts in British history at Knebworth. Through the film, his undiagnosed depression keeps taking literal form as he sees past versions of himself staring back disapprovingly from the audience whenever he's performing. And at Knebworth, it happens again and keeps growing until the crowd of 120,000 people is entirely other Robbies, as in other monkeys, until Robbie leaps into the field and a massive bloody battle takes place. It's the burly brawl from The Matrix Reloaded, but more violent and with confetti flying in the air, and everyone is a monkey, and a song called Let Me Entertain You is playing. Robbie is literally decapitating his past selves, and finally drives a sword through the heart of his child self. And then, as the film takes on the look of Justin Kurzel's Macbeth, Robbie faces off against the last one, and as he cuts his wrist, we realize that this is his suicide attempt. And watching this, it's like, how did we ever settle for all those boring-ass biopics before this? You gave fucking Bohemian Rhapsody a Best Picture nomination, and it does not have a single decapitated skinless monkey wielding a mace. Shame on you, Academy. This is why we need the vetoes now.
Exalt your fandom. Live your fashion. The 2025 Patrick H. Willems collection. The ordinary becomes spectacular. The cinephile's mug. Be bold and unafraid to express who you are. Tell the world, I appreciate Val Kilmer more than you. And finally we give you the Nobbles. You too can have a piece of the icon himself. Available now for a limited time.
But here's the thing. Even though Better Man might be the apex of the form, the most exciting and effective version of the classic music biopic structure, the evolution has been spreading in different directions. Life is finding a way. We have Kneecap, about the Northern Irish hip-hop group that hasn't even been around for a decade. Here, the band literally plays themselves in a movie that feels like a crime comedy from the late 90s. It's as entertaining as any movie released last year, and like everything the band does, explicitly political. And it also devotes far more time to the creative process of making the music than Bohemian Rhapsody ever did. And yes, I know it seems like I'm beating up on that movie a lot, but I don't care, it deserves it. Then there's Weird, the Al Yankovic story, which is a new evolution of the Walk Hard variant. A comedy satirizing biopic cliches crossbred with an actual biopic about a real person. In this case, obviously, Weird Al Yankovic. Yankovic co-wrote and produced the movie, plays a supporting character, and provides his own singing vocals, but his life story here is largely fictionalized. Initially, this is to conform to and parody the classic biopic structure, but then it goes increasingly off the rails, so in the end, spoiler alert, Weird Al is killed by an assassin sent by his ex-girlfriend Madonna, who has taken over Pablo Escobar's drug cartel after Al killed him. It's less of a direct takedown of biopics than Walk Hard was, but it assumes the audience is familiar enough with the tropes that it can riff on them to an absurd degree. Piece by Piece is actually even weirder than the movie that is literally called Weird. Every time I went to the movies last year and saw the trailer, I thought, what the hell is this? It's a movie about Pharrell's life, except what isn't clear until you watch it is that it's actually a documentary, except it's fully animated and everything is in the form of Legos. Sorry, Lego bricks for all you nerds in the comments section. So apparently, like Robbie Williams describing himself as a performing monkey, Pharrell just decided that he sees the world as one big Lego set, and so now we've got talking head interviews with like Pusha T, where he's a Lego person. It is a very strange choice, and obviously it made the movie way more expensive to produce than the more standard documentary they could have made. But it also does give what is largely a pretty by-the-numbers movie a delightful visual energy. Okay, but actually, the weirdest one of all of these, by far, is Aline. Like, straight up, this is one of the strangest things I have seen in years. It is a biopic about Celine Dion, except not really, because in a real-life Jackie Jormp-Jomp situation, it is based on her, but it's about a fictional character named Aline Dieu. But her life story is still exactly the same, and it uses all her songs, so really just like the names are changed. But that's not the weird part. The weird part is that director Valérie Lemercier, who was 57 at the time of filming, stars in the title role herself and plays the character from age 12 until her 50s. Let me say that again. A 57-year-old plays a 12-year-old, and she is digitally shrunk down so she looks like a hobbit or something. It is deeply unsettling, and even when she grows up and they don't need to digitally shrink her anymore, you're still watching a woman in her 50s play a 20-year-old while every other character is the age they are supposed to be. Look, in every other way, this movie is actually a completely formulaic biopic that does every dull thing you expect a biopic to do. It is not an interesting movie, except that at the center of it is a creative choice that is even more demented than The Monkey and Better Man, and 100 times more distracting. Seriously, what the fuck is up with this movie? But anyway, right now, it is too early to say if any of these mutations will carry on. Will we get a Led Zeppelin biopic in the form of an epic fantasy movie set entirely in Middle-earth? Or maybe a biopic about the B-52s, where the whole band is normal except for Fred Schneider, who's now an anthropomorphic B-52. Or maybe an R. Kelly biopic told entirely in reverse, like Irreversible, from R. Kelly's prison sentence and working backwards until the time he wrote Bump and Grind, and actually, you know what? No, let's not do that last one.
Patrick, this evolution discussion is starting to de-evolve into speculation of what could come next, but we still haven't fully examined what came before. May I present my findings on a certain movie that set the stage for all the films we've been discussing?
Let me tell you about heartache and the loss of God. Wandering.
Come with me to a time when lizards roamed and one was their king, back in the long, long ago of the early 90s.
Ah yes, the Oliver Stone Age.
The classic film The Doors stands out from its music biopic brethren because it has an internal friction. It believes in the power and intrigue of Jim Morrison and The Doors, and it believes in the power of the music biopic, a form which, at the time, had not been fully developed. But it also understands that this guy, for all his charisma, is kind of pathetic, and the tropes of all of this are a bit silly. Stone and Kilmer are building the music biopic and destroying it at the same time. And in the years to come, what they built would be flattened and conformed into something blander and more palatable.
Okay, that was great, but can you use some more science-y analogies?
Okay. The Doors is like watching a caveman struggle to take down a woolly mammoth, while later music biopics are like
watching modern man go hungry because DoorDash is down. That is an excellent specimen, Emma. Glad we could fit a Kilm's Corner into this one.
Remember, folks, Kilm's shirts are on sale now.
These new branches of music biopics still needed a host to grow on, so the original strain continued, but much weaker than it was before. In the past few years, we've had movies like Whitney Houston, I Wanna Dance with Somebody, and Bob Marley, One Love, both of which cowardly added the subject's name to the titles because I guess they were afraid people wouldn't know who the movie was about. And of course, there was also Back to Black about Amy Winehouse and Respect about Aretha Franklin. And all of these are still just doing the same things that have made these movies so frustrating and dull for decades. The Whitney Houston one is written by the same guy who wrote Bohemian Rhapsody and unsurprisingly follows the exact same formula, reducing a fascinating, tumultuous life story to a rote live-action Wikipedia article, where the most interesting part is watching Stanley Tucci's hairline gradually recede over 2 hours. The Bob Marley one, a crushingly boring movie, flashes back to the same shot of his traumatic childhood event in which a field catches on fire at 4 different points. So, did any of these movies actually make an impact? If nothing else, music biopics are reliable awards bait. I bet most of you forgot the movie Judy Exists, about Judy Garland.
You won't forget me, will you? Promise you won't.
But in 2020, Renee Zellweger won a Best Actress Oscar for it. But none of these movies I just mentioned earned a single Oscar nomination. The Bob Marley one was actually a commercial hit, like it made nearly 9 times as much money worldwide as Better Man, and yet, on Letterboxd, Better Man has been logged 35% more times. Right now, I know some of you are saying, hey, that's not a reliable scientific metric, but really, Letterboxd, similar to the Skinner box, was named after an operant conditioning chamber. Here, instead of rats learning to press a lever to receive pellets of food, Zoomer cinephiles are conditioned to come up with the most reductive one-sentence joke reviews of movies to receive likes. So what we can learn from this evidence is that while more people watched the Bob Marley movie in theaters, they're all old people who don't matter. As Whitney Houston sang in an extremely boring biopic,
I believe the children are our future.
And the children have chosen Better Man. But there is one major example of a more traditional non-monkey biopic strain that actually broke through. James Mangold's A Complete Unknown, starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan, was a commercial success that got 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Actor. Now, I've seen plenty of people dismiss this movie as just another standard formulaic biopic like the Bob Marley one, and plenty of serious Dylan heads hate it for its supposed inaccuracies, but let's be real, those people are annoying and I don't care what they think. Despite a glaring lack of monkeys snorting cocaine, I actually think this movie is pretty excellent, and way more interesting than it often gets credit for. This really doesn't at all belong to the original strain of biopics with the likes of Ray and Bohemian Rhapsody, films that cram the entire life story into 2 hours. This belongs more to the strain of better biopics like Love and Mercy, which picks a specific chapter of the artist's life to focus on. A Complete Unknown only covers a 4-year span of Dylan's life, focusing on his relationships with 3 people, and how, in different ways, he ended up breaking their hearts because he couldn't or wouldn't be who they wanted him to be. The common, easy criticism of this movie upon its release, especially if you wanted to seem like a cool film buff, was to compare it to Todd Haynes' more abstract Dylan biopic, I'm Not There, in which 6 different actors portray aspects of Dylan's identity. The idea being that Bob Dylan is such an unknowable, elusive, complex figure whose identity has shifted and evolved so many times that there is no way to make a traditional narrative film about him. Hence, I'm Not There, the cooler, more authentic movie. Now look, I like I'm Not There. I think Todd Haynes is an incredible filmmaker, and especially as a formal experiment, like a sort of proto-Cloud Atlas but all centered on Dylan, the movie is fascinating. But I reject the idea that this musician is just like, so deep, man, that you can't make a normal movie about him. That is some Dylan-headed nonsense if you ask me. Bob Dylan is a genius. He is undeniably one of the great artists in any medium of the past 100 years. But he is also a person, and he has lived a life. And yes, it's okay. You can make a normal movie about him. One of the things that I like about A Complete Unknown is that it gets at a similar idea as I'm Not There. Despite being the central character, Dylan remains an elusive figure here. You never see his backstory, and you're never sure if he's lying when he talks about it. The film is largely about the wonder and frustration of knowing a genius. What's so exciting about getting close to one, but realizing that you will always be at arm's length, that you can never understand him as well as you'd like. And it's not bad just because it's told in a more accessible, linear way. I've never said this about a biopic before, but this is a movie that I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel to, since this is just one chapter in Dylan's life. There are obviously so many more stories ahead, any number of which could be their own movie. Like, the one that I want to see is set in 2009 and is all about the recording of his song, Must Be Santa.
Who's got a big red cherry nose? Santa's got a big red cherry nose. Who laughs this way, ho, ho?
Because that is exactly what the good biopics understand and the bad ones fail at. You need to know what story you're telling, because the story of their life is not an answer. Life is an unintelligible tumble of events, of which the only real ending is death. That sucks. Like a good producer on a shitty reality TV show, you gotta trim that fat, synthesize things, and craft a goddamn story. So what does the future hold for the music biopic? What mutations will emerge next? Well, as we said earlier, the thing about cinematic evolution is that the ingredients that move it forward are money and awards. Rocketman, Elvis, and A Complete Unknown were hits, which means more movies like them will get greenlit. And as more of the formulaic old-fashioned ones like I Wanna Dance with Somebody or Back to Black flopped, that might make studios hesitate to make more like those. Sadly though, the biggest flop of all was Better Man. Despite the great reviews and the already growing cult fandom, it was a commercial disaster, which I guess means no more biopics starring monkeys. Coming this fall, there is Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere, the Bruce Springsteen biopic, which seems to be taking the same approach as A Complete Unknown, a serious mid-budget drama focused on a specific chapter in the artist's life. And according to early reviews out of Telluride, it's actually pretty good, an intimate story that avoids mythologizing Springsteen. Steve Pond at The Wrap called it, quote, a bracing and moving antidote to beefed up, heavily fictionalized rock biopics like the god-awful Bohemian Rhapsody. You love to hear it. But the biggest question mark in the realm of biopics right now is Sam Mendes's Beatles project. 4 interconnected films, one about each member of the band, bafflingly set to each be released a week apart. But whatever, we are not here to discuss release strategies. This has a good cast, and splitting it into multiple films at least means we don't have to deal with trying to fit the entire Beatles story into one movie. So right now, all we can do is wait and cross our fingers that it ends up as something interesting. Of course, more have been announced. John M. Chu is attached to a Britney Spears biopic. Apparently, Sean Levy is working on a Netflix limited series about Madonna, but these are all far off and may not even get made. Worrying about these future biopics would be like a dinosaur losing sleep over the atomic bomb. There is nothing that we need to panic about. What was that?
Oops, sorry, bumped into the hypnology. By the way, did you hear the news about the Michael Jackson biopic?
Yes, there is one looming threat I couldn't have predicted that threatens to undo all the progress we've made in the last 6 years. An old-fashioned biopic that could wipe out all of our new tenuous versions of the genre. On April 26th, 2026, Lionsgate Films will release Michael, the Michael Jackson biopic. Currently, the movie is undergoing reshoots and reportedly is so long that it may actually be split into 2 films. It's directed by Antoine Fuqua and stars Michael Jackson's actual nephew in the title role, making his film debut. The film's official synopsis promises it will tell his entire story, spanning from his childhood until his death, and all signs point to this being another Bohemian Rhapsody, but bigger maybe, and more powerful. There are many great movies that you could make about Michael Jackson's life. A deeply weird, fascinating, often extremely troubling life. But this movie will probably not be any of those things. Considering it's starring a member of his actual family and his estate needed to approve it in order to get permission to use his songs, this will almost certainly avoid touching on any of the sexual abuse allegations against Jackson, or just as egregious, any of his interviews with Conan O'Brien.
Welcome, Michael. Thank you for being here.
Hi there, Conan.
Jackson is still one of the most popular and iconic figures of the last 100 years. There are millions and millions of fans who do not believe any of the allegations against him, who believe he is a saintly figure, and surely those fans are who this film will be aimed at. Look, I would love to be proven wrong, for this to turn out to be something really interesting and unique. But I just don't see any way to make an officially endorsed Michael Jackson birth-to-death biopic and not have it inevitably end up as another Walk Hard clone. Where like in one scene, Jackson and Quincy Jones go to a video store to rent a movie, and Quincy says, "Hey, what kind of movie are you in the mood for?" And Michael says, "I'd like a thriller." And then he pauses and goes, "Thriller?" And then it cuts to a montage of him performing Thriller all over the world. I think, at best, this movie might have a handful of fun sequences, but will be a largely creatively bankrupt endeavor. But regardless, whatever it turns out to be, I will give it some brownie points if they keep Jackson's pet chimpanzee Bubbles. Actually, you know what would be a really great lesson to take from Better Man's Playbook? A Michael Jackson biopic told entirely from Bubbles' perspective, like a spin on the Elvis movie being told from the perspective of Colonel Tom Parker. Like, come on guys, if there is any final takeaway needed from this episode, it is that every music biopic, actually basically just everything ever, would be better if they astronomically inflated their production costs by making the character a fully CGI primate. And so, it pains me to leave our episode on a somber note. It seems that these newly evolved, more interesting music biopics are in danger of being wiped out again. Unless maybe it's possible to avert extinction. Yes. To avert extinction by reintroducing the initial catalyst. If it's true that our original music biopics video from 2019 is what jump-started this evolution of movies like Rocketman, Elvis, and Better Man, then perhaps this very video we're making right now is what will allow the genre to persist after Michael and continue to develop in surprising new directions. Emma? Nobbles? I think our work here today could be what saves the genre for the next 6 years or so.
Wow, so we were part of the very evolutionary process we were talking about? I feel like a real scientist today.
We should wear lab coats and goggles more often.
Except my fat fingers won't fit through the sleeves.
Okay, you guys get out of here. I have to do the ad read. Okay, speaking of music biopics, one movie that I didn't cover in this episode is Pavements, Alex Ross Perry's hybrid biopic/documentary concert film about the band Pavement, which actually co-stars friend and past guest of this channel, Griffin Newman. It is a perfect example of the new, evolved form of music biopic, and if you want to check it out, well, it is streaming right now exclusively on Mubi, our sponsor for this episode. Mubi is the curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. They have been releasing really exciting movies in theaters these past few years, like The Substance last year, and this year at Cannes, they picked up Lynn Ramsey's new movie, Die My Love, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, and it's coming to theaters next month. But they are also doing streaming better than just about anyone, the way that I think it should be done, with real people who love movies curating and hand-selecting an amazing selection of incredible films from around the world. Right now, we're obviously all very excited about One Battle After Another, but if you want more Paul Thomas Anderson, well, Mubi has his previous film, Licorice Pizza, which is one of my favorite movies of the last few years. If you haven't seen it for some reason, it is so much fun, and you've got to check it out. They've got so many more movies I love, like Noah Baumbach's Frances Ha, Dario Argento's Deep Red, Paul Verhoeven's Benedetta, which is absolutely nuts, Olivier Assayas's Personal Shopper, Armando Iannucci's In the Loop, Richard Linklater's Boyhood. Like, Mubi is the only place where you can watch Tarsem's The Fall, which was unavailable for years. But the thing that I am the most excited about, that I actually just started watching last night, is the mini-series Mussolini, Son of the Century. This crazy theatrical biopic about Mussolini and the rise of fascism in the 20th century, which you could say is very timely right now. Anyway, all 8 episodes are directed by Joe Wright, who of course made Pride and Prejudice, Atonement, Anna Karenina, Hannah. He rocks. I love Joe Wright. And the music is all done by Tom Rowlands of the Chemical Brothers, which is amazing. I have been hyped for this thing for like 2 years, and I wasn't sure it would ever be released in the US, and then Mubi swooped in and saved the day, and now I can watch it all. Also, Mubi currently has the entire series of Twin Peaks. If you've never watched Twin Peaks, you should, obviously. So if you want to watch some great movies and shows like these, are the many, many more that are on there that I didn't have time to mention here, then I have great news for you. You can try Mubi for 30 days, totally free, at mubi.com/Patrick H. Willems. That is mubi.com/Patrick H. Willems for a whole month of great cinema for free. So come on, go check out Mubi and watch some movies. I'm gonna take these goggles off now. Ugh. Bye.